Previously, we talked about the Arctic, the place at the very top of the world. Today, we're going south to look at the second of the Earth's polar regions, Antarctica. While the Arctic is mainly an ocean with ice floating on top, Antarctica is a continent. This means that under the ice, there's land. Antarctica is the fifth largest continent. It's larger than Europe and almost twice as large as Australia. Antarctica is the only continent to be covered by ice though. More than 98% of it is covered by a layer of ice that's more than a mile thick. This enormous amount of ice actually accounts for more than 90% of all the ice in the world, and more than 70% of all the fresh water in the world. If all the ice in Antarctica was to melt, sea levels around the world would rise by over 60 meters. The continent of Antarctica was not always cold and covered in ice, however. Many millions of years ago, it was part of a much bigger continent, a supercontinent. It was much further north and covered by forests, not ice. However, millions of years ago, Antarctica broke away from this supercontinent and moved south to where we see it today. It got colder and colder and became covered in thick ice. Today, Antarctica is the coldest place on Earth. The lowest temperature ever recorded on the continent was minus 89 degrees C. Antarctica is colder than the Arctic in the north, and this is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Antarctica is mainly land, not ocean, and land heats up and cools down quicker than water. In our video about the oceans, we talked about how water can keep a more constant temperature than land. This is what happens up north in the Arctic. In the summer, the water keeps the Arctic cooler, and in the winter, it keeps the Arctic warmer. The temperature over the whole year up here is more constant. This doesn't happen in Antarctica, which is mainly land, so it can get extremely cold. Antarctica is also colder because the ice is so thick that the top of the continent is quite high up. The higher you go, the colder it gets, just like climbing up a mountain. Like the Arctic, Antarctica has at least one day a year when the sun is shining for 24 hours a day, and at least one day a year when it's dark for 24 hours a day. This is due to the Earth being at an angle. Apart from the ice, Antarctica also has mountains and even volcanoes. The continent is surrounded by the Southern Ocean, which, despite the cold, is actually full of life. Nothing really lives inside the continent. Most of the animals here either live in the water or on the land around the coast. The most famous animals here are penguins, seals, and whales. But there are also some more mysterious animals, like enormous squids. Only animals that have adapted to the cold can survive here. A lot of them have a thick layer of fat to protect them from the freezing temperatures. Although there are some animals that live here, there's no permanent human population. The first person to reach the South Pole was a man from Norway called Amundsen, and this was in December 1911. Then, in 1959, there was an agreement or a treaty that tried to stop a lot of human activity on the continent. This treaty means that people can't use Antarctica for anything military related, or anything to do with energy or mining, getting natural resources out of the ground. People have discovered that there's oil and gas and coal in Antarctica, as well as metals like iron. However, in order to protect Antarctica and to keep it a wilderness area, people are not allowed to go and get these resources. Some things are allowed though, things like tourism and scientific research. Today, although nobody lives here permanently, there are a few thousand scientists and researchers here living in different research stations across the continent. They study things like the Earth's climate and the animals and plants that live here. Antarctica is also an excellent place for astronomy, studying the universe, studying the night sky. The land is high up, meaning the atmosphere is quite thin here, and there's very little cloud cover. More importantly, however, there's almost no light pollution. All this means that Antarctica is probably the best place in the world for seeing the night sky.